Today on the official Marvel podcast, Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again showrunner Dario Scardapane reveals the decisions that shape the fates of our favorite characters in Season 2 and gives us a hint at what's to come in Season 3.
Kingpin rises to become the mayor and kind of puts New York under his boot. And I was really interested in the idea of what is a relationship like Matt and Karen? How does that evolve under the umbrella of a resistance?
Plus, author Sara Shepard discusses her newest novel, Agatha Harkness, Fall of the Coven.
There's a lot of twists and turns. It's kind of like a soapy boarding school story, dark academia kind of. It's the two sort of witches battling it out in modern day Salem.
I'm Quinn Lamar.
I'm Evan Narcissus.
And this is the official Marvel podcast.
Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again Season 2 has continued the conflict between Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk, and they're not holding back. There were intriguing new characters, Jessica freaking Jones, intense face-offs, shocking deaths, and honestly, I'm still catching my breath.
I know, right? I cannot believe it. And listeners, incredible news to report. We got an exclusive interview with showrunner Dario Scardapane covering everything from Vanessa Fisk's story arc to Karen Page taking center stage to last night's heart-stopping finale.
Amazing. Before we dive in, you know what we need, right, Quinn?
Of course I do.
All right, sound that spoiler alarm. Oof. Hearing that bell is taking me back to the brutality of the episode 4 boxing match. I needed a spoiler alarm for our spoiler alarm.
Let's get into it. Here's Dario on his goals coming into Season 2 of Daredevil Born Again.
I wanted to continue the flip side of Kingpin rises to become the mayor and kind of puts New York under his boot. And then I wanted to tell a resistance story. And I was really interested in the idea of what is a relationship like Matt and Karen? How does that evolve under the umbrella of a resistance? What is love in a firefight like? And then at the same time, I wanted to get to a very, very specific moment in the courtroom in episode 8.
Y'all, I'm never not impressed by Dario's mind. Heather Glenn, played by Margarita Laviva, has had quite the evolution since Season 1. Dario discusses her journey.
Every one of the characters, from Matt and Wilson all the way through the cast, everybody has to pick a side. Everybody has to make a decision. Everybody has to kind of pick a side and deal with the consequences thereof. Now, with the Heather Glenn thing, the funny thing is that the thing that defined her in Season 1 was being a victim of Muse. Now, that always sits weird with me in these type of shows where the supervillain does something and we ignore the victim. So with Heather Glenn, it was like, okay, what does that experience do? Does that experience push her towards the safety of the Fisk regime? Okay, so now she's part of the system. She's the kind of mental health czar as she's slowly going crazy. And Margarita brought it with a capital B. Like there's a scene between her and Deb that it's insane. There's a scene between her and Artie Frusciante that's just like bonkers. And it was really fun to examine the creation of a new villain. And we did that kind of step by step with her.
Moving on to another complex female character, Karen Page, played by Deborah Ann Woll, takes center stage this season. Dario breaks down how he brought her character to the forefront.
Unfortunately, in last season, because of the nature of that season, she was only in the beginning and the end. And I always said that she came back for a reason. We never got to see her process her grief over Foggy in Season 1. And we never got to see her wrestle with everything that had happened. So now we get to. And, you know, her and Matt is like this relationship that's like a love in the resistance, you know, love in a firefight, love in crisis. And then she's given an opportunity where the person who killed Foggy is right there. And, you know, as somebody says to her, justice isn't vengeance. And Matt's own rage that fuels this resistance and her own rage that fuels this resistance, it's not necessarily a good thing. And where that leads them, you know, she does a reckless act. She gets herself arrested. That topples a lot of things. You know, you're always kind of trying to do these if then. So if Karen doesn't kill Bullseye, what then? And it turned out pretty interesting. And I also think that Deborah Ann Woll brings so much to the role. You don't craft the role without her. When we talk about, here's what we're thinking, I get these great emails that are like super insightful, and I always take a lot of those notes and bring them into the script. All of that was kind of a dialogue that started really early on.
This season, Daniel Blake, played by Michael Gandolfini, has struggled to figure out how far he'll go for his boss Wilson Fisk and his friend BB Urich. Dario explains how he and Brad Winderbaum, head of television streaming and animation, arrived at Daniel's fate.
So the thing that's absolutely crazy, in the first cuts, Daniel survived, but we got to a place where he's basically saying to BB, let me do the right thing. Let me kind of pay the price for doing the right thing. And there's that scene when he's saying to Buck, one day you'll be the one on the ground with the gun pointed at you. And it had to end where it did. And the funny thing is, it was Brad who first brought it up. Brad Winderbaum said, hold on a second. It seems like the story ends there. And much as I was like, you're right. And then we called Michael and I'm like, dude, and the funny thing is he felt the same way. And that was really unusual how, because we love him, because we love the character, because we really wanted to see the right thing happen, what we wrote was emotionally untrue. So yeah, that was not scripted that way. So that shows that we were writing a story that we didn't want to do the logical conclusion.
While we know what happens between Buck, played by Artie Fruition, and Daniel, there's still a lot left unanswered about what's next for Buck. According to Dario, his story is far from over.
This is a guy who's picked a side. He fought for Queen and Country. He gave that up to fight for a paycheck. Now he's fighting for a man he ostensibly believes in. But as Daniel tells him, this man will betray you. And I don't know if Buck doesn't really understand that. Where we leave him gut shot and bleeding out on the floor of the courtroom, his story's not over. And neither is Heather's and neither is theirs. And, they haven't paid the consequences for the side they picked yet.
Moving on to a character that continues to surprise us, Bullseye, played by Wilson Bethel, has struggled with the killings of Foggy Nelson and Vanessa Fisk, and according to Dario, can only live with what he did by balancing the scales.
So Bullseye has a really interesting kind of morality, and Wilson and I had talked about this. He doesn't see it as good and evil. He kind of sees it as math. This happens and I need to balance the scales. And he really does believe in this Fisk world, he's a good guy. And he believes that by going out and killing Task Force, he's doing the right thing. And he's kind of trying to even the playing field with Matt, which, being Foggy, Vanessa, even, I can die now. Okay. And that's kind of a very Bullseye train of thought. And then Matt, being Matt, saves him. And then Matt, being Matt, gives him a shot at redemption. One good deed. And that is probably the biggest can of worms that Matt Murdock has ever opened, because now you've given him one good deed. He's back in the world where he thinks he's a good guy. He's back in the realm of Mr. Charles, where now he's official again. And Matt, in doing an act of mercy, has probably unleashed something truly horrible on the world.
And Matt helping Bullseye ties into a bigger question. Will Daredevil find redemption? Dario explains why the journey is more interesting than the answer.
The weird thing I think about Matt Murdock is he keeps talking about things like redemption and then behaves in a manner where he just digs himself deeper into a hole. I believe that Matt Murdock believes firmly in grace, redemption, the perfectibility of man, the idea that through good acts you can become closer to God. I believe that he believes all of that. At the same time, he is horrible at managing his impulses, and he embraces the language of violence. Those two can't reconcile. So what is Matt Murdock's redemption? I think at the end, there is penance. He goes and he pays he says, I am Daredevil, and he pays the inevitable cost. That's just the beginning of the story. That's the funny thing. It's like Matt's journey, where you could say, oh, this finally happened. He's been arrested. Okay, that is not the end of the story. So, what he goes into next, is there redemption for Matt Murdock? Is there redemption for Wilson Fisk? I don't really know the answer to that question. And I think that that's the fun part, is we're going to keep asking that question.
One of the most shocking moments of the season is the death of Vanessa Fisk, played by Ayelet Zurer. Dario explains why Vanessa's murder was pivotal to the storyline.
So in one of the comics, and it's from Vanessa, and she's dying of cancer, and she says to Daredevil, this fight between you and Wilson, it poisons everything. So I kept thinking about that. And poison starts to threaten to seep into the city. The poison seeps into everybody's relationship. The poison took Foggy. If Matt's going to lose Foggy, Wilson has to lose Vanessa to get them into the place that they have to be, where they're so raw. They become the same person. They're kind of on almost the same side of the fence. That had to happen. It was a difficult decision, as with Foggy. And the thing is Ayelet we were all heartbroken. And then Ayelet embraced it. And her performance in episode 5 is amazing, amazing, amazing. So yeah, I think episode 5 is the gut punch of the season. It's pretty tough, but we had to do it. Daredevil is doomed to be the hero. Fisk is doomed to be the villain, and they're doomed to be connected.
Dario was really excited to bring Mr. Charles, played by Matthew Lillard, to the screen. As he explains, it was important that Lillard's personality shone through in the performance.
Matt's a really close personal friend of mine. I wrote the role for him. So we knew that we were going to bring somebody in who was part of the intelligence committee. Now, there's a couple of ways you can go with that. You can go with I'm a CIA guy. Boring. And then you could do what I would say is the Matt Lillard version of that, which I knew when I wrote it that it was going to be a Lillard character. I knew that once people got on board, he was going to knock it out of the park. It was just something, I wanted that flavor, because this is a show that can really buckle under the weight of its own earnestness. So sometimes you need the Jessica Joneses, the Bullseyes, the Mr. Charleses to have a little fun. And Charles is pretty damn evil, but he's having a pretty good time doing it. You know, the scene with him and Kristen Ritter is joy. Like joy to watch, joy to write, like just a good time.
So what was it like building out the moment Matt Murdock, played by Charlie Cox, is revealed as Daredevil? Dario says it took working together as a team with the cast and crew to get there.
It's one of those kind of earth-shattering mythology moments. And the only way to get there is to take him into a place where in this season, Kingpin is 100% Kingpin, Daredevil is 100% Daredevil. What are the consequences of that? So there were long throws that I think took some convincing of some people. And at the end, you know, we were really allowed to do these things. Charlie Cox, man, that is an insanely long scene. Ian McDonald, our producing director, we think about courtroom scenes, but it's like you're in a box. You're shooting inside a box. You need to make it really dynamic. You need to make it really kind of sing. You've got Vincent D'Onofrio, you've got Charlie Cox, and it's a boxing match. And, you know, there was a lot of conversations with both the actors on how to get to that exact moment. And it worked. And I believe from the moment they sat down in the diner in season 1, it was leading to that moment. And I was trying to build a thread from A to B, and it kind of worked out. I mean, particularly when it came to taking the debate that he had with Hector Ayala about outing him as White Tiger. That was the only way he could win that case. So what happens if the only way he can win another case is by outing himself? So that was a starting point. There were so many things that we walked into season 2 knowing. And, you know, a lot of times what happens is we form a season, we have a Bible, we have a series of beats, and we want to hit these. It was really one of those times where we got so much support, and it was like, we're going to do this.
With the shocking finale, where do we leave Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk, played by Vincent D'Onofrio?
So they're on 2 islands. They've been sent to their rooms to think about what they've done, I guess. But the funny thing is that the line that kind of sums up the end of the season was not written until Deb came and said, you know, I think she would say, I thought we'd have more time. And you're like, ugh! And that sums it all up. You know, they get their brief moment of we won, the scales are balanced, and it's super fleeting. And for Fisk is never going to be truly held accountable. Those kind of people never are. So he ends up exiled. And what does that mean? You know, one of the things, and I know it drove some people crazy, I wanted to take these 2 characters to extreme places at the end. Like Fisk is on an island, Matt's in a jail cell. Because then that leads to what a great place to start. Like we're not used to seeing them starting in those places.
Season 2 was one heck of a ride, and Dario says the stakes are even higher for season 3.
What is the man without fear in a place that fear is a commodity? What is the man without fear like when you're in a place where it's predator and prey? You're not beating people up and leaving them to be picked up by the cops. What does Daredevil look like in Rikers Island?
Child, this has been an exciting season. Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again Season 2 is now streaming on Disney+.
Dario Scardapane has got me so hyped for season 3 of Daredevil Born Again. What a great interview.
I know, right? It was super interesting to hear him discuss his process, getting to the root of Matt Murdock's story arc in season 2. Listeners, do you want to hear even more about the making of Daredevil Born Again?
We're going to assume that the answer is yes. You can watch and listen to the Daredevil Born Again official podcast right now. Over the course of the series, we've heard the cast and crew discussing unforgettable moments from shooting, what didn't make the cut, fun facts about the series, and so much more. Here's one of our favorite moments from the podcast featuring Charlie Cox and two of the show's directors and executive producers, Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson.
I also seem to remember that I very bravely threw myself off a 20-foot scaffolding headfirst backwards.
Yes.
That is also not in the show.
You're going to have to take that up with Dario.
Yeah, okay,
All right?
fair enough.
Yeah. And like, we're sure there's a part of you that's like, it kind of doesn't matter whether it's on film because your good buddies, Justin and Aaron, saw it. And we were proud of you.
I need the audience appreciation. Otherwise, it counts for nothing.
Okay, so this is that. Then.
Gotcha.
This is the just.
Yeah, okay, so that's why I'm bringing it up.
The podcast has wrapped up, but you can still watch all episodes on Disney Plus or listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Quinn, let me ask you a question. Do you ever wonder what Agatha Harkness might be up to when we're not seeing her on screen?
Absolutely. Like, is she writing a novel? Is she starting a podcast? You know, what could she be up to? And I mean, who doesn't wonder that about her? That witch is always up to something. Witches be crazy.
Exactly. Thankfully for us, author Sara Shepard is continuing Agatha's adventures in the new book, Agatha Harkness, Fall of the Coven. And I got a chance to speak to her. Let's take a listen. I'm joined by writer Sara Shepard. Thanks so much for chatting with us.
Thanks.
First question I want to ask you is, what was your introduction to the Marvel Universe? Can you tell us about your Marvel fandom?
I mean, I was not like a comic reader or anything like that. I would say my first Marvel entity that I really loved was probably Spider-Man back in the day. Loved the whole franchise. But then I sort of watching, all the Avengers movies and stuff like that and watching them with my kids and just a general fan of the whole world.
Was there anything about Spider-Man in particular that drew you to him as a character?
I just loved that it was sort of set in New York City. I lived in New York City for a long time. I loved that it was a kid. I was just getting into like writing YA. I was in an MFA program and I remember editing somebody else's story and referencing the Spider-Man plot line of like, so this is like how you should like do your sort of act 1 and then act 2 because remember when, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm referencing Spider-Man. It's a compelling idea that kind of is timeless.
So with Agatha Harkness, Fall of the Coven, did you feel like you had something to say in terms of your previous writing experience in YA? Like, what about this project drew you in to be like, you know what? Yeah, I'd like to take a swing at that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Agatha, I love her as a character, Agatha Harkness. She is sort of my favorite YA, like in a YA version, my favorite character to write because she's independent. She doesn't need anybody. She's super smart. And those have always been my favorite characters to kind of get inside. And maybe I felt like that as when I was younger. This project sort of was brought to me and kind of like, well, have you watched WandaVision? And I had, and I really loved WandaVision. And this was before the Agatha All Along show came out. And I've always loved witches. And I've always been very intrigued. I've been intrigued by it, but I've always kind of afraid of kind of like, oh, well, everybody else, that's like a thing that other people can do. They can write about people having powers. But then when I kind of started looking into her as a character and where she comes from and how I could sort of base this in a little bit of history but then like start to combine it, then I just started to get really excited and thought like, you know what, I could try to do this and I could combine what I love to do, which is write books that have a lot of twists and turns and mystery and thrills and red herrings and all of that, and also soapiness and romance and friendship and whatever. But like, I could try to create this character who kind of has these abilities and where things are not what they seem. And so it was a good way in for me to try something a little bit different without it being a complete like different universe, world building, where I would have felt very out of my element. So I thought it was actually like the character, her world, it was a very good fit for me.
What did you do in terms of researching the character or the historical moments to help ground Agatha as a character for you?
So the book actually starts in Salem. It's during the witch trials. So I did a lot of research on what that was like and kind of how that came about, which was really interesting, and her place in it. And I did a lot of searching around in sort of the Marvel databases where she popped up, here and there. And actually she was in Europe for a time, kind of protesting against persecution against witches in other places. And there was this whole battle. So anyway, I did a lot of research on sort of where she was. I concentrated on her, as a witch, kind of in a coven back in these sort of old times where witches were very shunned and kind of pushed to the side and blamed for everything and all that. So that was sort of my research on her. And of course, watching WandaVision and watching Agatha all along. And then, like I said, I did a lot of research into Salem as a place because the story starts in Salem and then she leaps forward into time and she's still in Salem. So it's sort of what Salem looked like, back then and what it looks like now.
All right, so let's walk through the basic premise of the story and what are some of the challenges that she has to face across the journey of the story.
It starts when Agatha is living in Salem. She is in a coven. She does not necessarily want to be part of this group of witches. She is much more powerful than they are. And it's a tumultuous time in Salem because the villagers are starting to kind of blame the witches for everything that is going wrong in their town. So she kind of wants to get out of there, but she also feels protective over this coven because she knows what's coming. She has lived through these sort of witch hunts before. She has found what she thinks is the dark hold, and she's very excited about that. And, she's kind of thinking of using it to kind of stop what is going on with the persecution of the witches. But what happens is there is another powerful witch within her midst that she doesn't realize. She steals it. A portal opens up. She dives through. Agatha is very determined to keep this book of spells. Obviously, this has always been sort of her quest. And she kind of dives after her through this time portal thing, hurdles into the future, and she ends up in Salem still, but it's about 330 years forward. And she realizes that where she and the coven have been living has now been changed into a boarding school for teenagers. She is in a boarding school dorm room. There is a girl standing over her saying, "You're my new roommate." And she realizes that this witch who was kind of sort of in hiding in her coven, who was way more powerful than she realized, knew what the Darkhold was, stole it from her, probably is also in this time and space. And it's her, now she needs to kind of find her before that witch finds her and destroy her. And she kind of has to pretend that she is a 16-year-old in school, which is very much not her vibe. And that's, I think, that was like the fun entry point for me, in that it was like this very independent character who absolutely does not want to be around people most of the time. It seems like suddenly having to like have a roommate and like have to go to class and all these sort of, putting her in this very uncomfortable situation while she tries to figure out where the Darkhold has gone, where this other witch is. But along the way, she, makes friends and she kind of has a romance, and it becomes increasingly more difficult to hide who she really is. So there's a lot of twists and turns. There's a lot of magic. And it's kind of it's like a soapy boarding school story, dark academia kind of. But, in the end, it's the two sort of witches battling it out in modern day Salem.
All right. And you can't do boarding school YA stuff without a little bit of romantic intrigue. So who's the crushes, the relationships that Agatha grows into in the present day?
She finds this group of friends who, ironically, they have formed a coven because witches are cool because they're going to school in Salem. So they formed this like coven. Like, it's like, they're not really, they have like herbs and, they're doing the Ouija board and stuff like that. And then Agatha strolls in with her real magic. But she does find this one guy attractive. He is intriguing and he kind of listens to her and like wants to get close to her. And she's not the kind of character who wants to be close to anybody. So that's like a struggle for her, in that she doesn't want to care. And I think that's the thing that she learns through the novel with these friends and with this crush is that she does care. And of course there is a rival girl. But yeah, it's a lot about friendships and a lot about love.
So what other obstacles in terms of high school drama might Agatha be getting involved with in this high school setting?
She has to adapt. There's a lot of adapting just to what boarding school is like, what modern day is like, which is kind of funny. And one scene that was interesting to write was she goes to the actual Salem Museum and sees the names of some of her old friends on the wall. And that's not really something that has to do with really boarding school, but it's more just how is she adjusting to modern day. And she kind of panics because she realizes that the world that she left, that Coven, they're all kind of wiped out. And it's very eerie, even for her to see that in the future.
How would you describe the book tonally? Like, what's the mix of tones and colors that you're looking to bring forward in the book?
She's a snarky character. She's got a lot of humor to her, a lot of sarcasm. And I always love that. I mean, I love bringing sort of some lightness in with all the dark stuff, because it is a dark subject, what happened. And so I think it's a little bit balanced. I think there's a lot of it that's fun. I mean, there are a couple of really big, there's a fun Halloween party. The friendship is really fun. There's a lot of fun, magic that happens. And then there's a lot of kind of scary magic that happens. It's kind of a mix. I try not to take it too seriously. It's written first person in Agatha's POV, and she's, she always has these sarcastic little sides. But yeah, it's not too serious, but there are moments that are a little dark.
What are you most excited for readers to discover in the book?
There's a little bit of a question and a tease through the book. And did you figure it out? Because there are definitely clues, but there's definitely, it definitely is a big surprise. And that was kind of fun to layer in as well. So besides, of course, all the magic and seeing Agatha trying to fumble her way through boarding school and teenager life and all of that.
Is there a magical spell that Agatha performs in the book that you would want to execute in real life?
She does a lot of things. She's a little bit held back by not wanting to use magic. She does simple things, quick things to kind of get out of jams. But she does, this is silly, they have to volunteer on this little farm that's next to the boarding school. And she strikes up a friendship with a couple of animals. That is really fun. She strikes up a friendship with a crow who gives her interesting information. They kind of are on the same wavelength. And then she strikes up a friendship with a goat who ends up kind of following her, through the portal to the next wherever she's going to go. So I think that would be a lot of fun. I mean, sure, I would like to create all kinds of disasters and shoot sparks through my fingers and all the crazy things that witches can do. But I love talking to animals. Sorry.
Sarah, it was so great speaking with you today. Thanks again for joining us.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Agatha Harkness, Fall of the Coven, is now available wherever books are sold.
And while we're on the topic of superheroes trying to navigate high school along with their powers, there's definitely more YA options to check out within the Marvel Universe. If you're looking for another great read, you're going to love this comic recommendation for Marvel Assistant Editor Lindsay Kohig. She shares why this 2024 release is one you can't miss.
Avengers Academy. I might be biased towards this one because I worked on it from start to finish, but I also just, even if I hadn't been working on it and I'd just been a reader, this would be 100% the type of thing that I love to read. It's a team book that does the team part so well, focusing on individual characters while also weaving stories about them as a unit that is so great and so full of heart. The character relations are great. They're teenage characters and a couple younger characters as well. There's Captain America of the Railways. There's Kid Juggernaut, Escapade, Bloodline, Moon Girl, and Red Goblin are the team in its entirety. They're not characters who you would think go together really well until you start reading the comic and you're like, wait, their dynamic is amazing. And it is also, this is just kind of icing on the cake. It's super queer friendly, and speaks really well to the broad spectrum of queer experiences in a really meaningful way.
Ready to dig into Avengers Academy, Marvel's Voices Infinity comic? You can find the first 6 issues in print at your local comic shop and the entire series on Marvel Unlimited.
Next week on the Official Marvel Podcast, join us for a supersized celebration, including a discussion with writer Christos Gage and artist Edgar Salazar as they discuss their new series, Civil War Unmasked.
One of the big things that happened in the original series was Spider-Man unmasked before the world as Peter Parker. That obviously is a huge decision. In our second issue, we'll show how Peter Parker took the time to talk it over with Aunt May and Mary Jane. Should I do this? Should I not do this? What will happen? How will it affect all of us?
This episode of the Official Marvel Podcast was hosted by Quinn Lamar and me, Evan Narcis.
Our producers are Jasmine Estrada and Anita Flores.
Brad Barton is our Senior Manager of Audio Production and Development, and our Production Manager is Emily Godfrey.
Mixed by Justin Harris.
Our theme music is by Ida Akbal.
Executive produced by Larissa Rosen.
Thanks for listening.